individual who's on PCP. She's saying, don't touch me. She's not screaming, she's not crying, she's not sobbing. Mr. Norris was interested in having the sounds of domination or fear. I wanted some sounds of pillow talk or kind of dirty talk.
On the eerie and fateful night of Halloween in 1979, a chilling incident unfolded that forever altered the course of 16-year-old Shirley Lynette Ledford's life. Little did she know that a single decision, driven by trust, would lead to a nightmarish encounter with two men who seemed friendly at first glance. In an unfortunate twist of fate, Shirley's misplaced trust would become the catalyst for a tragic and haunting series of events that unfolded that Halloween night, leaving an indelible mark on the pages of history. No one could have imagined the horror she endured. If you're at all squeamish, you may want to stop listening. What ensues is an authentic recounting of events, devoid of any embellishments or fictional elements. The genesis of this harrowing tale can be traced back to the year 1977, when the paths of 29-year-old Roy Norris and 36-year-old Lawrence Bittaker converged within the confines of the California men's colony in San Luis Obispo. These two individuals, ultimately christened as the Toolbox Killers, began a sinister partnership that would go on to send shockwaves through the annals of criminal history. Upon their release, their nefarious scheme unfolded as they meticulously plotted to commit heinous acts of rape, torture, and murder targeted at teenage girls. Their sinister agenda was disturbingly precise, focusing on selecting one victim from each year of the teenage spectrum, spanning from 13 to 19 years old. 2 years following their release, these malevolent collaborators joined forces on the outside, acquiring a silver 1977 GM cargo van, christened as Murder Mac, to serve as the vehicle for their dark deeds. From February to June in 1979, this unsettling pair engaged in a peculiar series of encounters, picking up over 20 female hitchhikers. Their intentions were not to cause harm, but rather to practice the art of luring young girls into their van. During this period, they also dedicated time to exploring remote and quiet locales. In April, their search led them to discover a secluded fire road in the serene San Gabriel Mountains. Armed with a crowbar, Bittaker skillfully replaced the lock on the gate to the fire road, marking a peculiar turn in their unsettling journey. All they needed now was a victim. On the evening of June 24th, Lucinda Lynn Schaefer, a 16-year-old, departed from her Presbyterian church gathering in Redondo Beach. Little did she realize the malevolent forces that lay in wait for her as she ventured into the night. Upon completing the setup of a makeshift bed in the rear of their van, where tools, clothes, and a cooler, filled with beer and soda, were discreetly stowed away, Bittaker and Norris decided to head to the beach around 7:45 p.m. The tranquil evening took an ominous turn as Lucinda was spotted walking down a quiet side street. Bittaker, with a chilling tone, remarked, "There's a cute little blonde." However, their initial attempt to entice her into the van proved unsuccessful, despite offering bribes of marijuana, beer, and a ride home. Undeterred by the setback, they drove past Lucinda and strategically parked alongside a driveway. Norris, the van's door sliding open, positioned himself with his head and shoulders concealed from view. As Lucinda approached, a brief exchange of words ensued before Norris swiftly sprang into action, pulling her into the van. In that moment, the cruel twist of fate was sealed for Lucinda. Trapped with her wrists and ankles securely bound and her mouth silenced by duct tape, Lucinda found herself utterly defenseless. Though her initial scream echoed the horror of her predicament, the cruel reality was that she had no means to fend off the impending ordeal. In the face of this dire situation, the only semblance of control she retained was the steadfast determination to deny these monstrous individuals the satisfaction of witnessing her agony. In a written statement, Bittaker claimed she displayed a magnificent state of self-control and composed acceptance of the conditions of which she had no control. She shed no tears, offered no resistance, and expressed no great concern for her safety. I guess she knew what was coming. With the radio blaring at full volume, Bittaker steered the van towards their prearranged location nestled in the mountains. Meanwhile, Norris remained in the back of the van where Lucinda was held captive. Upon reaching a desolate fire road, the two men took turns subjecting Lucinda to unspeakable acts, with one of them taking periodic breaks to take a walk. Lucinda, in the midst of this horrifying ordeal, mustered the strength to make a poignant request, a mere second to pray, before Norris attempted to manually strangle her. However, just 45 seconds into this chilling act, Norris was overcome by the haunting sight of Lucinda's protruding eyes, prompting him to retreat to the front bumper of the van, overcome with nausea. Unfazed by this gruesome spectacle, Bittaker proceeded to tighten his vice-gripped fingers around Lucinda's neck, witnessing her body slowly succumb to the ground. As convulsions seized Lucinda's lifeless form, Bittaker, with a disturbing sense of methodical cruelty, looped a wire coat hanger around her throat and tightened it with pliers, a horrifying act that both men would repeat in subsequent instances. The subsequent image of Lawrence Bittaker at his trial in 1979 serves as a chilling reminder of the grotesque actions perpetrated by these individuals. In a final act of callousness, Norris and Bittaker callously wrapped Lucinda's lifeless body in a plastic shower curtain and callously discarded her into a canyon, anticipating that the presence of wild animals would obscure the heinous nature of their actions. A distressing repetition unfolded 2 weeks later when the ill-fated pair encountered 18-year-old Andrea Joy Hall hitchhiking along the Pacific Coast Highway. Following a nightmarish sequence involving unimaginable acts of violence, they heartlessly compelled Andrea to pose for Polaroids. The sheer terror in her eyes mirrored her desperate pleas for mercy. Their hearts remained impervious to compassion. In a devastating turn of events, they drove an ice pick through her skull, followed by strangulation, before callously discarding her lifeless remains off a cliff. On the unfortunate date of September 3rd, Jackie Doris Gilliam and Jacqueline Leah Lamp found themselves patiently waiting at the bus stop near Hermosa Beach. The attempt to allure the two girls into the van with the promise of marijuana and a free ride sadly proved successful. However, the initial optimism waned as the girls realized Bittaker was deviating from the expected route to the Pacific Coast Highway, opting instead for a path leading towards the San Gabriel Mountains. In a regrettable twist of events, as 13-year-old Jacqueline slid open the side door, Norris abruptly struck her over the head with a bag filled with preloaded lead weights, causing a brief loss of consciousness. Attempting to further subdue the situation, he then bound and gagged the 15-year-old Jackie Gilliam. Despite these efforts, Jacqueline, showing remarkable resilience, managed to regain composure and once again attempted to break free. Unfortunately, she proved no match for Norris, who forcibly wrenched her arm behind her back and dragged her back into the van. The unfolding of these distressing events reflects the tragic vulnerability of the two young girls in the face of unimaginable danger. Bittaker, recognizing that the distressing scene unfolded within view of potential witnesses, smoothly shifted the gear into park. Swiftly making his way to the back, he callously sucker-punched Jacqueline in the face, subsequently collaborating with Norris to bind and gag the two girls. As they eventually reached the San Gabriel Mountains, Jackie and Jacqueline endured a nightmarish captivity spanning nearly 2 full days, subjected to repeated acts of sexual assault and coerced participation in explicit Polaroid sessions. Adding a disturbing layer to their torment, Bittaker coldly recorded the initial instance of assaulting young Jackie, heartlessly instructing her to feel free to express your pain. During the trial, Norris asserted that he had buried the incriminating cassette in a nearby cemetery, though its recovery remains elusive. The torment inflicted upon these unfortunate girls is beyond comprehension, with unimaginable acts including the piercing of their breasts with an ice pick. Norris, in an act of unspeakable cruelty, used pliers to tear off one of Jackie's nipples. Even in the face of death, a swift release was denied to the victims. Bittaker gruesomely drilled an ice pick into each of Jackie's ears, setting the stage for the tragic end. Jacqueline then endured an unspeakable sequence of brutality, subjected to relentless beatings with a sledgehammer, followed by sadistic strangulation. The torment continued with another round of beatings, culminating in the final, fatal act of strangulation. From the grave, Shirley Lynette Ledford evoked the most profound emotional response among the jurors and the courtroom audience. The prosecutor, seeking to convey the unimaginable horror Shirley endured before her tragic demise, played a gut-wrenching 17-minute tape recording. It is said that on that fateful Halloween night, 16-year-old Shirley Ledford accepted a ride because she recognized Bittaker from the restaurant where she worked part-time as a waitress. Evidently, Bittaker was a familiar face at the establishment. Shortly after Shirley entered the van, Bittaker steered to a secluded side street while Norris unsheathed a knife. In a nightmarish turn of events, he proceeded to bind and gag Shirley with barricade tape, and thus began the harrowing nightmare. Bittaker and Norris switched roles, with Norris taking the wheel and driving aimlessly for more than an hour, while Bittaker subjected Shirley to cruel torment. Bittaker callously commanded her to scream louder and questioned why she seemed hesitant to do so. Shirley's desperate pleas were captured on tape as she implored Bittaker, saying, "No, don't touch me." Bittaker heartlessly responded, "Scream as loud as you wish," proceeding to brutally assault her with a sledgehammer and punching her breasts with the intention of beating them back into her chest. As Bittaker carried out the heinous acts of rape and sodomy on Shirley, he further tormented her with pliers, engaging in unspeakable. Roy Norris stated in court, "We've all heard women scream in horror films. Still, we know that no one is really screaming. Why? Simply because an actress can't produce some sounds that convince us that something vile and heinous is happening. If you ever heard that tape, there is just no possible way that you'd not begin crying and trembling. I doubt you could listen to more than a full 60 seconds of it." Consider that Norris possessed an IQ of 135. Despite attempting to downplay his role during testimony, he actively switched places with Bittaker, participating in the brutal alternation of torturing and raping the young girl. Norris was the one who initiated the recording, revealing a disturbing inclination to immortalize his own sadistic treatment of Shirley. In a horrifying turn of events inside the van, Shirley witnessed Norris seizing a sledgehammer, prompting her to scream, "Oh no!" Norris heartlessly struck her left elbow, shattering the bone, and shockingly continued the assault despite her pleas to stop. Shirley, in a state of desperation, begged him not to inflict further harm. In response, Norris mercilessly targeted that same broken elbow with 25 additional strikes. When the relentless assault finally ceased, he coldly glared at Shirley, who was left sobbing, shaking, and terrified. "What are you sniveling about?" he callously remarked. Following 2 hours of unimaginable torture, Norris ultimately ended Shirley's life by strangling her with a coat hanger, tightening the wire with pliers. Bittaker chose to place her lifeless body on a random lawn in the cloak of darkness. Bittaker kept watch as Norris callously arranged Shirley's mutilated remains on an ivy patch. The post-mortem examination uncovered extensive blunt force trauma inflicted on Shirley Ledford's face, head, breasts, and left elbow, the latter bearing multiple fractures, including the olecranon, the bony tip of the elbow. The horrific scene continued with torn genitalia and rectum, a result of Bittaker's brutal act of raping her with pliers. Additionally, her left hand bore a puncture wound, and a deep slash marked a finger on her right hand. During the trial, Bittaker callously asserted that the audio recording documented nothing more than a consensual encounter, though he admitted that, in the final moments, Shirley Ledford pleaded for death. It's heartbreaking to consider the unbearable pain endured by Shirley, prompting thoughts that, faced with such torment, pleading for release from suffering becomes a desperate plea for mercy. The autopsy's revelations paint a harrowing picture of the extent of cruelty inflicted upon her. Subsequent investigations led to the discovery of Jacqueline Leah Lamp and Jackie Doris Gilliam's remains in the San Gabriel Mountains. However, the whereabouts of Lucinda Schaefer and Andrea Hall remain unknown. Regarding Bittaker, an initial execution date was set for December 29, 1989, but he appealed. The U.S. Supreme Court upheld the decision, but set a new execution date for July 23, 1991. Bittaker appealed again, and on July 9, 1991, the court granted a stay. As of 2017, Lawrence Bittaker remains on death row at San Quentin State Prison. As for Norris, his request for release was denied by the parole board in 2009. However, he is expected to complete his full 45-year prison term in 2019. The unsettling reality emerges that this individual, once involved in such heinous acts, may one day be free again.